Hey everyone, how's it going? I got another video for you today. This one's a little bit of a different one. This is kind of an experiment. I'm trying a new camera angle and new sound setup. Basically, I'm going to be starting to do more videos from the bench, and so I wanted to test out a new sort of overhead camera and a little bit of a simpler audio setup. But I want to talk today specifically with you about airbrushes. I am brand new to airbrushes. I've only done a little bit of work with my airbrush up to this point. But I've learned something about airbrushes that I didn't quite know before, and that required me to actually go out and buy a second airbrush. And so I want to avoid that for you if at all possible. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So I purchased this airbrush here. This is a siphon-fed airbrush, which means it pulls paint in from the bottom through, say, a bottle like this or this little cup that you see right here. And I purchased this as part of a kit from Amazon. It came with not only the airbrush, but the air compressor. I got a pretty nice air compressor with this kit, along with cleaning tools and bottles and all sorts of other things that you might need for an airbrush. And I think for the price, it was a very good deal. And so I would still recommend that you take a look at those kits on Amazon. You might be able to save yourself a few bucks buying everything kind of all together in one kit as opposed to buying parts separately. Now, there's nothing wrong with this airbrush itself. This is a Pache Talon, and from the reviews I've seen, it's a pretty good airbrush. It's not the best airbrush out there, but for what I'm doing with my model railroad, which is mostly weathering, this is going to be perfectly fine. I'm not doing fine art with this particular airbrush. I'm not doing very, very tiny miniatures with this kind of thing. This is for weathering. This is for painting track work and that kind of thing. And so Apache Talon, I think, works well. It seems to be well reviewed and would be perfectly fine for that kind of scenario. I bought the siphon-fed version because I wanted to be able to swap between bottles, which I can hold a lot of paint for things like weathering my track work or painting clouds on the backdrop, that kind of thing. I can take paint and thin it down, put it in this bottle, and it is ready to go for the airbrush. And then I can then swap to this little paint, what do you call it, bucket well. I can't remember what they're called now. My brain's locking up on me. But then, to hold smaller amounts of paint and to paint models individually, weathering and that kind of thing. And so to be able to swap back and forth, I thought that was a really good thing. One thing I did not know about siphon-fed airbrushes was actually kind of a big deal, and it wasn't quite made apparent to me until I actually got in and started painting models and figuring it out for myself. And that ultimately led me to have to buy a second airbrush. This is a gravity-fed airbrush. It is a Pache Talon. It's the same style of airbrush. I bought the same one so that they use the same hose connector and things like these extra fine needles that I purchased for myself. I could swap those between airbrushes. But the reason why I needed to go with the gravity-fed one, even though I had this little attachment for this guy here, right? So you would think that they would both work the same, right? Well, they don't. And the problem is the difference between the two is the amount of air pressure required to siphon the paint up this tube and into your airbrush versus the amount of air pressure it would take to just spray the paint that kind of is gravity fed into your airbrush itself is quite a bit different. This takes quite a bit more air pressure to do what it needs to do with that siphon mechanic, if you will. And what that means for your models is you are blasting your models with a lot more pressure, a lot more air, and it's just it's pushing the paint around more. It's kind of splattering the paint over your model more. And so the really fine detail work, the light, the ability to spray lightly, to mist your model, kind of goes out the window a little bit here with something like this. And I don't remember the PSI difference between the two, but it is significant enough that you're not going to be able to get as nice of a finish with something like this versus something like this. And that is something that I did not know until I actually started painting my models and realizing, like, oh, this is a lot of air kind of hitting these models. This is kind of moving this paint around on the surface of this model quite a bit. So something I wish I knew, if you're just getting in and you're looking to buy your very first airbrush, I think you're best off going with the gravity-fed version and then seeing if you actually really need one of these later on. Having the ability to put, a lot of paint into a bottle and just continue to spray, I think is nice to have, certainly. But for, I think, the most of what we're going to be doing as model railroaders, a gravity-fed airbrush is the way to go. Another couple of tips that I think is very helpful. I really feel like, especially with airbrushes, if there's anything that you can do to make the process of painting that much quicker, do it, right? Because you're just going to be much more likely to pick up your airbrush if the process of cleaning it out and setting it up, cleaning it out, all that kind of thing, was as easy as possible. So I actually picked up one of these guys right here. This is it's like an airbrush cleaning station. And it's a jar with an interesting kind of lid, and it's got a little bit of a holder here. What I can do is, when I'm kind of in between spraying, I got a little space on my workbench that I can hold my airbrush. And then when I'm cleaning, all I need to do is just take some airbrush cleaner, spray it into my bottle here, and then I can spray, put the tip into this bottle, kind of spray away, spray all the airbrush cleaner through here and into this bottle. It doesn't get anywhere. It doesn't get all over the place. I don't have to drag my airbrush over to the sink and drag the compressor over to the sink and all that kind of stuff. I can kind of take care of all the cleaning process at my workbench. And it all stays nicely contained within this bottle and just keeps everything kind of clean and easy to clean out and easy to sort of set up and put away. Now, obviously, you're going to want to occasionally, or more than occasionally, take your airbrush apart and just clean it up and make sure that the needle's not clogging and that kind of thing. But something like this is definitely, as you're sort of putting your airbrush away for the night, a great way to go. So that is going to be it for my quick sort of beginner tips or things to think about when it comes to airbrushes. Yeah, this is something that I didn't know whenever I went and purchased my first airbrush, and I could have saved myself some money had I known the difference between a siphon-fed and a gravity-fed when it came to the amount of air pressure it takes to apply paint to a model. That is a good thing to know, and hopefully I've saved somebody out there a few bucks. So thanks again for checking out this video, and I'll see you everyone in another video.